Hello everyone and welcome to new adventures of Rick and Morty, Meek and Morphy. We already checked out one game between the two of them. Morphy won it quite convincingly. Then we had that big chess party at the St. Denis Hotel where they were being awesome. And now the match continues. So first the 3 wins, best out of 5. Let's see what happens here. Morphy with the white pieces opens with e4 and Meek replies with e6, the French defense. And this, I know what you're thinking, this can only end well. We have d4 by Morphy and now g6, a variation you will not see a lot today, although it has been used in top-level competition, at least to serve as a surprise for your opponent. Bishop to d3, we have bishop to g7, and now bishop to e3. Developing the bishops, and Morphy wants to develop the knights via d2 and e2, and then he wants to castle, maybe push f4, and so on. We have knight to e7, and here knight to e2 by Morphy, and it's important to note that this position has never been reached again, even though it's only move 5. We have b6, Meek prepares the fianchetto, the light square bishop, and now knight to d2. We have bishop to b7, and Morphy just castles, and now d5, a principal decision. Striking in the center, asking white, do you want to allow this capture, which will free up my light square bishop, or do you want to block the center with e5, which is what Morphy did, and now I can reply with c5. And now in modern chess we would most likely see c5, as it is what you want to do when you play the French defense, but here Meek decides to castle first. He's gonna prepare c5 first with knight to d7. Morphy continues with f4, and now not allowing further expansion with something like g4 and f5, Meek plays f5 himself, which closes down the center. However, it creates this weak e6 pawn, and Morphy will definitely try to go after it. It will sound like knight f3 to g5 and then to e6. So first, Morphy goes for h3. He makes room for his king. He wants to play king h2, push g4, bring the rook over to g1. If Morphy really respected his opponent, which I don't think he did, as I don't think Morphy respected anyone in terms of chess skill, he'd probably go for b4 and prevent this c5 idea. But as he saw that Meek wasn't interested in going c5 when he had the chance, he probably thinks that he's not interested in it now. So a bit of a twisted logic, but if it works and if you take down your opponent faster that way, why not? So h3, like I said, preparing king h2, and now knight to d7, preparing c5. We have king to h2 by Morphy, and only now c5. We have c3, strengthening the center, also making room for his bishop here, and here Meek has to decide whether he wants to capture, whether he wants to keep the tension with something like knight to c6, or does he want to keep the center closed with c4. And he goes for c4. Now, the engine, for example, likes both c4 and knight to c6, like keeping the tension and closing the center, but to me, c4 feels very unnatural, and I don't know. It's very unclear what this light square bishop will do for the rest of the game, and seems like a very non-human decision to me. But okay, we have bishop back to c2, and now a6. Meek prepares b5. We have knight to f3. Now, like we said, e6 is a weak pawn. Morphy is going after it. Knight f3. He wants to go g5 to e6. And now h6, straight out preventing Morphy to jump in with the knight to g5, although b5 was also a perfectly good decision. For example, if knight g5, now you can go queen b6, develop the queen this way, you keep an eye on the pawn, maybe prepare some further expansion on the queen side, and so on. But okay, h6 by Meek, and now g4, everything is ready. We have king to h7, as Meek is expecting Morphy to bring the rook to g1. He wants to counter his rook with rook to g8. So the king makes room for the rook. We have rook to g1 and now rook to g8. We have queen to e1, now preparing queen to h4, which would be very nice. So knight to c6. Here Meek guards the h4 square, doesn't allow Morphy's queen in, but he allows knight to h4. And this is what we talked about when h6 was played. By playing h6, you kind of weakened the g6 pawn, so maybe that b5 queen b6 idea was a little bit better. And here it's already hard for Meek to find a good move. It's hard for him to make use of his pieces. The knights here, the bishop, the rook, really not doing all that much. So, and it's very hard to bring them into the game. Knight to f8 is sort of an attempt, but still it would be a very hard game for Meek. He played queen to f8 instead. But now, feel free to pause the video and try to find the best way to continue the attack for Morphy while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the knight sacrifice and the double check. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight captures on g6. This only makes sense. The queen is under attack, you have to capture. If you don't capture, if you just move the queen, then, well, you've just lost a very valuable pawn. White will just continue with the attack, you're dead lost here. So you have to take up the challenge, but now g captures on f5, opening up a discovery from the rook. Also, there's a check from the pawn. So king f7, and now captures on e6 with check. If you don't capture the pawn, then Morphy gains back material. So king e6, but now f5 with check. Everything just falls in place. If king goes to f7, then you can just push the e6 pawn with check, pick up the knight that way. So king to e7 was played, but now Morphy, of course, doesn't want to allow the king to escape to the queen side. So queen to h4 with check, king goes back to e8, and now f6. And now again, it's extremely hard to find a good move here for Meek. For example, if you try and keep on to everything, for example, bishop to h8, then it's bishop captures on h6, attacks the queen, and after queen moves, now e6 is deadly. Because you just open up the e file, you're threatening to capture, so you do have to capture, but now knight f4 attacks the queen, and after the queen moves, now you either bring the rook to e1 with check, or you trade a pair of rooks and then bring it to e1 with check, and now there's really not much to do here. For example, king here, f7 check, just picks up the queen, and all the other moves aren't really that much better. So after f6, Meek says, okay, Morphy, you sacrificed a piece, I'm gonna sacrifice piece back, and that way I'm gonna survive the attack. So he plays bishop captures on f6, which is always a principled idea. When you're under attack, your opponent sacrifices material. If there's no other way, you should look for ways to give back material and stabilize your position, maybe survive the attack. So this is what Meek is going for. E captures on f6, and now rook captures on g1. Morphy recaptures, rook captures on g1, and now knight captures on f6. And the material on the board is equal now. Both players 5 pawns, pretty much the same material. However, Meek has some problems with his undeveloped queen side. So what do you do here? Morphy goes for bishop to g6 check. So it seems Meek survived the attack, but not really. King to d7, and now bishop back to f5 with check. Again, not allowing the king to run away to the queen side, because if, for example, king c7, bishop f4 check, and there's no escaping the bishop pair, you would have to go back, and then again, it's a very, it's a quick death for black. So after bishop f5 check, king back to e8, and now bishop captures on h6. The queen is under attack, you have to move the queen, although you cannot leave the defense of the knight here. You kind of don't want to go something like queen to e7, then again knight to f4 is coming, rook to e1 is coming, the e1 square is already covered. Everything is just terrible for black here. Queen to h8 was played, just keeping an eye on the knight, but rook to g7. Now the black queen no longer defends the knight, and here black has to make a move, although there aren't any good moves here. So here, Meek just played knight back to g8, but it was also in this position that Alexander Balfour Meek resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. It's actually a forced mate in 3. There are a few different mates, so feel free to pause the video and try to find this forced mate in 3, either of them. Well, I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting either of them or both of them. Better if it's both of them. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's just important to kick away the king to f8. So bishop to g6 or d7 does the job just the same. For example, bishop checks, king has to go to f8, and now either rook f7 check or queen to f2 check will do the job. You have to do something, you cannot move the king anywhere, you have to block, and then it's just queen captures on f6 mate, and it's the same if you don't go here. If you go here, still the king has to go to f8, and it's the exact same mate. Knight blocks, and queen to f6 will now be mate. So that's game number 2 between Morphy and Meek. I didn't find how long this game lasted, although I will double check for the next video, so maybe I will be able to find it. We know that the previous one, game 1, ended in less than an hour, but we don't have that info on this one. But yeah, Morphy takes game 2, and 3 more games to go, or until Morphy wins 1 more game, or if Meek wants to win the match, he has to win the next 3 games in a row. So we'll see what happens, but I think you do know what happens. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Joseph Kupreshanin, Christopher Fernandez, Crash Mats for Hire, Anonymous, and Michael Hildebrand for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the Paul Morphy saga, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, and everything else that happens in the chess world. While we're on the subject of what happens in the chess world, the World Chess Championship will take place in Dubai. It is now known, and it will take place. I don't know if this is already decided, but probably in December. And they will move the World Rapid and Blitz Championship from December to October, so they make room for the World Chess Championship between Carlsen and his next challenger in December. I don't think they've decided on everything regarding the matter, but when they do, I will keep you posted as usual. So yeah, thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent start of your week.